Shalom, when the stuff was but given no praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, B'Shem Kadash. Double honors to the apostles of great Most High, and honors to brothers doing the work of the Most High in truth and in sincerity. Yahweh's real name, with whom the world eagerly calls God, Jehovah, or Yahweh. His real name is Yahweh. Son's true name is Yahushua. And when we pray Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, meaning in, meaning that, and Sham, meaning names Yahweh, and the name of Yahushua. Real quick, just wanted to go back over this topic. I was just meditating on it earlier on, right? In regards to, you get people that try use this and try and make brothers look crazy. It's just like, bro, we're just reading what the scripture says, right? And I was thinking about, as well, just like how when you really look at this system, it's better than, as in the system written in the scriptures, it's better than what happens now, right? What happens now, someone goes in, someone goes and does what is written here, right? And then, let's say gets caught, goes to prison for a little while, comes out and does it again, and can do it manyfold, right? To the end that, you get what's, people that are referred to as serial thepashists. We call thepash being a Hebrew word for lay hold on, right? And they just quote unquote get away with, right? And people actually try and make us look crazy, right? And this, that, and the other, which that's all prophecy, right? We're in good stead, right? Because at the end of the day, scripture says the servant is not greater than his master, right? It says Matthew 5 and I'll start from 10. It says, blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Okay, so we're in good stead, right? Let's see what precepts we have, right? Why is it jumping like that? This is Luke 21:17. It says, "Ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake," right? But they shall not a hair of your head perish, and your patience possess you. So but the point I wanted there is, and you shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. Like, precept into the previous verse we were just reading, right? But the points that we are, that we're reading, that we're getting to in this precept, right, is in both these precepts is, the men of the Lord were spoken evil against, right? You read Hebrews the 11th chapter and all the different things that the men of the Lord went through, right? It's just it's a lot, right? So it says, let's see, just trying to remember, it is, verse 36. So Hebrews 11 and 36, it says, in fact, let's 30. I'll start from 32, right? It says, what shall I say more? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and of Barak and of Samson and of Jephthah, of David also and Samuel and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings. Yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonment, they were stoned, they were sawn asunder, right? Which, I believe extra biblical sources say this is Isaiah. I believe it's Isaiah. In fact, let me just said that now. Let's see. Hebrews 11, 7, talking about Sunday. Right, yeah, so Hebrews 11:37 is widely understood to refer to the prophet Isaiah, who tradition holds was sawn in half by the order of King Manasseh, according to Brill and Wikipedia, while not explicitly named in the Bible, this event is recorded in early, they say, Jewish and Christian tradition, including Talmud, and is widely accepted as a reference in this Hall of Faith chapter, right? I've never, I've never actually heard it referred to that. Hall of Faith. That's a beautiful, phrasing, right? Because at the top, right, in verse 6, right, it says, but without faith it is impossible to please him, right? For he that cometh to the Most High must believe that he is, and that he is a reward of them that diligently seek him, right? So yeah, Hall of Faith chapter. That's a beautiful title, right? But yeah, but what we're reading here is just how the men of the Lord went through things, right? There were times when, there were after we hear about their valiantness, and then there were time when, the Lord allowed our, the enemies of the Lord, rather enemies of the prophets, which are the enemies of the Lord, right? First and foremost, to come and so-called prevail against the men of the Lord. It's like just my washing machine is just going, if you can hear that, right? But yeah, let's read into this, right? It says, so I asked the robot, right? It says, think thoroughly about the following, right? Deuteronomy 22 has various laws and sexual morality, which, a lot of the things, people come up against us on, right? You think about the alphabet stuff, right? The posh as written in, taken hold as written of in Deuteronomy 22nd chapter, right? And would you call it the natural order of things, I am man at the head of the house, right? All of these things get used against us, right? Yet these are things that are actually for for the betterment of life, right? Because when you read the different laws on sexual morality, right, yeah, people will just stop at the alphabet stuff, but it goes far deeper than just that, right? That's just the prevailing thing, right? Although E tries to push more, right? It goes on, family rammings, right, as the elder says, right? Goes on family rammings, right? Goes on about taking your neighbor's, a woman, right? That's wickedness, right? And both of those acts, right, alphabetism and adultery, right, results in the same punishment and the same judgment, right? Which usually the 22nd chapter goes in on that as well. Okay, so Deuteronomy 22 has various laws on sexual morality, some of which are by today's standards, right? And that's the key. It's today's standards. When the apostles say you've been in America too long, it is of a truth, right? You have people that have just been in America too long, and therefore they, when you speak to them, right, they're just applying everything to this modern lens, right? The whole issue, got several issues where people are just looking at it from today's lens. It's like, nah, look, we ain't Americans, we ain't British, right? We ain't any of these modern day titles. We're Hebrew Israelites, more specifically, right? And we had customs and ways about us that, in the eyes of this world, seem strange. But guess what? In the eyes of ancient Israel, right, this world seems bloody strange, right? In fact, on that, I think about this precept sometimes, right? I'm gonna jump somewhere, right? Verse 3, right? It's point once in verse 3, right? Ezekiel 37, the vision, right, says the vision of the valleys of dry bones, right? It says the hand of Yahweh was upon me and carried me out in the spirit of Yahweh and set me down in the midst of valley which was full of bones, right? This valley represents a low land, which is referring to America, right? It says, and caused me to pass by round about them, and behold, there were very many in the open valley, and lo, they were very dry. There are a lot of Israelites in America, right? Whoopsie, right? It says, and he said, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, Oh Lord, pow, all right, thou knowest. Right, the reason why I'm bringing out in this context is you look at Jake, and Jake, you imagine, because this is what would have been happening, right? This is what would have been happening. This would have been Ezekiel looking at America, like, and just like, yo, this is Jake, right? So then imagine you being asked, can these bones live? Ezekiel's like, I don't know. You tell me. Okay, which is why I'm bringing out in this context, because this modern world, how we are, if we got transported back to ancient Israel, right? Some of us, some of us before we came in this truth might have been tatted up, right? Might have been, just looking crazy. Just keep it. Might have just been looking hella crazy, even the way we dress. You might be walking with your, let's say you and your woman gets transported there. Right, let's be real. It's like even if she dresses so-called modest according to this world standards, right? According to the ancient world, it's just completely different, right? It is just completely different. They gonna look at like, yo, what's going on, right? I remember just a quick A side, watching not watching but like reading something on Twitter, right? And then basically with the person, it was like a red light district in Japan, and what someone in the comments said is it's funnier that the prostitutes in Japan dress more modestly than the average Western woman, okay? Which f all of them heathen nations. I mentioned some of these things just because I know about them, right? Not that, because you get people that talk about, China, China's next and this, that. No, they're all wicked too, and when America goes down, right, so will they. Okay, but let's go into this, right? So it says, so I was asking, Deuteronomy 22 has various laws in sexual morality, some of which are by today's standards very controversial, especially verses 22 to 29, and even more specifically, verses 28 to 29. Critically discuss the relevance of the highlighted verses in the context of the time and punishments meted out, and convert the amount in verse 29 to the day, it's like in today's money, and what the impact would realistically be today. Like, respond in a matter-of-fact way without adding the lens of today, right? So it says, I'll treat the passage in its ancient legal social setting, right? Then separately estimate the 50 shekels, right? And the thing is, actually gets that wrong. I had to reprod it, right, and eventually gets it right, because at the end of the day, as different people call it, you're still dealing with artificial. This is artificial idumia, right? So yeah, it goes on to say Deuteronomy 22 to 29 is case law, right? It distinguishes several situations by marital status, consent, location, and public discoverability, which consent, that's not really accurate, right? Verses 22 to 24 deal with adultery or betrothal violation, right? The penalty is death because the offense is treated as an attack on an existing marriage, claim, or household covenant. Okay, and when I think about this, you get people in the world, and this, then even in today's world, that person, that the posh someone, right? They deserve to be. In fact, let me actually just read, because I keep saying the posh. Right, this word here, the posh, right? H8610, right? Right, so to catch, handle, lay hold, take hold of, seize, and wield, right? So we carry on, right? It says verses, so people in this world will be like, oh, he's the posh, he should be killed, and this is like, well, this is exactly what this precept is saying, right? Except the thing is, it's not about her. It is about the fact that, as we read here, right, is an attack on an existing marriage, claim, or household covenant, right? So basically, it's like you've just completely violated, right? It's adultery, which is punishable by death, right? And that's throughout the scriptures, right? And betrothal violation, right? Because she is betrothed, right? She's offered to someone else, and you came and you took it, right? And in fact, actually, when it says consent, is if she consents with it, guess what? She goes too, okay? Verses 25 to 27 treats the betrothed woman as innocent when the act occurs in the country where no one could hear her cry, only the man dies, right? So verse 28 to 29 concern an unbetrothed virgin, right? The man pays 50 shekels, right? Marries her and loses the right to ever divorce her. The text of verse 29 says the man pays the woman's father 50 shekels, right? And may not divorce her for life. In its own settings, the logic is not primarily individual romance or modern criminal law, right? Because people in this world, they love that whole romance thing, right? But that's that's not what the scriptures are about. In fact, let me in my other tab, let's ask the AI mode, see what we can get, right? This real quick, just try to get an answer real quick, right? So let's bring it to here, right? So this is, when did people start marrying for love? While individuals have likely married for love throughout history, it only became the societal norm in the West during the 18th and 19th century. Need we read more? Need we read more? Right? For most of recorded human history, marriage was primarily a practical contract designed to forge political alliances, consolidate wealth, or ensure economic stability. Now, that's not to say that, there were never men that looked at their woman was like, rub their hand, just like, yo, I want a piece of that. No, that's obviously, will have happened, right? In fact, there is a law on that, if I can remember where it is. Is it this one? I think it's 20 and 16, maybe. Where is it? What is it? This is gonna annoy me. What is it? Basically, sweet talks her. Yeah, he sweet talks her. He sweets him. He's 22. Oh, you see, I went back. I should have gone forward. It says Exodus 22:16, right? And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife, right? And why is he enticing her? In fact, I've never looked up this word entice, right? It says usually, figuratively, more it calls it allure, right? Deceive, enlarge, entice, flatter, right? Persuade, right? Seduce. Let's see here. Right? And hey, bros know what we're talking about. Certain bros got that gift, man. So, how you doing, baby? All of that good stuff. Right? And then you see her just, talking to the chick, she's all just what do you call it? Opening up, as we just read there. Okay? Right. So I'm not saying that, men, and we've got different stories, right? And then I forget. No, it's lucky. I'm forgetting the different. Yeah, but that was good enough. Not shy. Right. It says Genesis 24:67. It says, Isaac brought her into his mother. Let me read it from here. From 63, Genesis 24:63, and Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the eventide, and he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she lifted off the camel. For she had said unto her, the servant, What man is this that walketh into the field to meet us? And the servant has said, right, it is my master. Therefore she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. And Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, right? It's a different word there. And took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death, right? So we need not say what happened. We need not say what happened, but we know. We know. Okay? So I'm just having a little bit of fun with it. Right, but let's go back into this, right? Because yeah, we took that segue, right, just to answer this, right? It says the logic is not primarily individual romance or modern criminal law, right? Because it's like that whole romance thing. I mean, it's got Rome in its name, okay? It says it is about household order, right? And the scriptures talk about. In fact, let's get that right. This is 1 Corinthians 14:40. Let all things be done decently and in order, right? The Most High is all about order, right? As it is in heaven, right? On earth as it is in heaven. Okay. And that's it, man. Right? Inheritance, right? Because when you look into the law, there's a whole thing about inheritance, right? Forget the intricacies of the law at the moment, right? But talk about can look up the land inheritance and things of that nature. It says bride price, sexual exclusivity, right, and the woman's future marriageability, right? Because yeah, so I mean, you read this, right, and the woman's future marriageability, right? Because it says a non-betrothed virgin's violated status affected her father's household and her prospects. Right, the imposed marriage and permanent ban on divorce placed a lifelong economic obligation on the man who caused the damage. Right, it was not a light fine only; it converted the offence into a compulsory support arrangement. Right, because is it in the ancient world, if a woman had been gone into, right, basically men in the ancient world married virgins. Right, so why the scripture says, a wicked and adulterous generation, right? Because really, right, we're supposed to be dealing with virgins, right? The best we can do is just be like, yo, you single, okay? Goes on to say, and you know what? This I'm just gonna skip this because it got it completely wrong. It says, matter of factly, the law reflects a society where sexual misconduct was judged by its effect on covenant order, household honor, inheritance, and economic security. The punishments are therefore calibrated around whether a man's marriage rights were violated, whether the woman could plausibly be guilty, and what permanent provision was required when her marriage prospects had been damaged. Right, so it was basically doing a metal conversion, right? But basically, it got it wrong, right? So I said I've seen a conversion near 250k, right? Validate against this. Also, what would happen if the man could not pay? It says the $250,000 fine you've seen isn't coming from the metal value of silver. It comes from treating the 50 shekels as large economic penalty relative to income, not as bullion. Right, so it's validating the claim. It says there are two fundamentally different ways to convert ancient money. Right, the metal value literal, which is what it did before. It says around 18 troy ounces of silver, which is only 1,500 today. Right, this is strict commodity equivalent. It's what I gave earlier. Right, like, so you see how now you get a completely different number when you corner this bloody robot, man. Right, why, especially if brothers use this at work, man, you got to be careful with it. Right, it says economic weight. Right, it says a shekel in the Hebrew Bible is often tied indirectly to wages. A common raf anchor 1 shekel is roughly around a month of labor. This varies, but it's a widely used approximation. Right, so 50 shekels is around 50 months of wages for around 4+ years of income. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know about you, but if my fine for doing something was 4 years of income, it's peak, isn't it? Right, I'm a think very hard before I do something. Right, so now that scales to, right, if modern full-time income is around $50,000, yeah, 4 years around $200,000. Right, so and that I remember this 250,000. I believe I remember hearing that from the apostles. Right. Right, it says it's just using a different conversion model in terms of economic burden. Right, so it says what happens if the man couldn't pay. It says the text itself doesn't spell out a contingency, but within the broader legal framework of the Hebrew Bible, there are only a few realistic outcomes. Debt obligation, which is not optional. Right, it says this is not a discretionary fine, it is a binding legal liability. The man is already compelled to marry her. The payment part is part of that obligation. Right, indebtedness, servitude, and this is what I was thinking about, because it's like if you couldn't pay, and in our law, if you are in debt, right, you basically end up going into, if you can't pay, you basically end up going into servitude and slavery under the man. Right, so he will likely enter debt servitude. Right, general laws in Exodus and Leviticus. Either he or his labor will be claimed until the obligation was satisfied, or if his family could help him pay. Which I find, so it's the reason why I'm thinking about this more. Was thinking about this was something that people try frame and once again try use against us, and it's just like, actually, when you read it, this is a much better system than what you get here. Right. In fact, let me have a look for this in an incognito window. Average. Let's find out what the robot says. Right, so it says the average custodial sentence for the Push has generally been around 9 to 10 years, right, in recent years, right, with data from 2020 showing an average of 9 years, 10 months. Right, this is saying, look, man, you break it, you lose, it's yours forever. But if she's been betrothed, right? Right? And or if she's married and she screamed out, or if she didn't scream out, both of you are dead. If she did scream out, then it's just you. Okay? Right, so let's just read it and close it out. All right, so Deuteronomy 22 from 22. If a man be found lying with a woman married to an husband, then they shall both of them die. Right, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman, so shall thou put away evil from Israel. Now, once again, if this was to happen in would you call it? If this was to happen today, how normal would life be? Right now, you listen to all of the songs. Maybe, and I remember the day it clicked. It says Mrs. Jones, me and Mrs. Jones. So that's wickedness. Okay. And all of the men that have died or in jail, right, because because of adultery, right. If this penalty was applied, this world, just that alone, this world would be a much better place. Okay, verse 23. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto an husband, right, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, right, it says, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of the city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he hath humbled his neighbour's wife. So shalt thou put away evil from among you. But if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. But unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death. For as when a man riseth against his neighbour and slayeth him, even so is this matter. Right? So basically, it's like you imagine a guy is just out in the sticks. He's waiting. And he just goes out and kills a man. Right? It's basically the same. It's likened unto the same thing here. Right? It says, for he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried out, and there was no one to save her. If a man find a damsel, right, that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, and lay hold on her, and lie with her, and they be found, then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he hath humbled her. He may not put her away all his days. Right? And that's it. Right? These wicked Israelites, try basically getting offended, right, at the Most High, right? Damn. It's like, my memory fails me right now. I broke the which so it says Matthew 11 and 6. Blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me, right? And that's it. You get these people that ultimately are you get these people that are so I'm just double checking something. Yeah. And I was just double checking that shekel value. You get different values for it. But like I said, that 250,000 was a number that I remember being this gives us not only a minimal substance wage of about 2 shekels a month. So some say 2, some say 1, some say more, but going off of what was. Yeah, so scholars estimate that in ancient Israel, a shekel of silver might have been equivalent to a worker's monthly wage. Yeah, so yeah, we'll go with that. But yeah, but the bottom line is, you'll get these scoffers that will try say, speak wickedly, on the apostles on down really. But ultimately, what are they doing? Right, they're denying the Lord. Right, in fact, deny. Right, this is Matthew 10:33. Right, so 10:32 says, whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess also before my Father which is in heaven. But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. And that's it. Okay, so as always, that was edifying. Until next time we say shalom.